Let's continue our study in the Gospel of John. We are now in chapter 12, verses 16 through 19, and we can title this Various Reactions to the Triumphal Entry. In 12:16, we read the disciples' reaction. They didn't understand until after Jesus was glorified, very similar to what happened back in chapter 2, verse 22. The eyewitnesses, well, they kept giving their testimony in 12:17. Those that heard that testimony, another group, they went out to meet him in 12:18. And finally, the Pharisees are upset at his popularity and frustrated at their inability to stop him. So one of them makes the ironic statement, "Look how the whole world is going after him." That's 12:19. So various groups have their responses to the triumphal entry. Chapter 12, verse 16. Now his disciples did not understand these things at first, but when Jesus was glorified, then they remembered that these things were written about him, and they did these things to him. This verse is very similar to 2:22, which explains that only after his resurrection the disciples understood his words when he drove the traders from the court of the Gentiles at the temple complex. After the Lord was glorified, they understood that he, who was indeed King of Israel, was a king far different from the king that the public was hoping for. Chapter 12, verse 17. Therefore the crowd that was with him when he called Lazarus out of the tomb and raised him from the dead was bearing witness. That verb, was bearing witness, is in the imperfect tense, indicating that this was an ongoing, repeated activity. They kept on testifying. That crowd that saw Lazarus raised from the dead was not willing to remain silent. In the midst of the crowd welcoming the Lord to Jerusalem as their Messiah, they repeated and continued to give testimony about how the Lord Jesus raised Lazarus from the dead. Chapter 12, verse 18. Also on account of this, the crowd met him because they heard he had done that sign. That verb to meet is hupantao. Hupantao in the New Testament it's always positive. There's one possible exception, but it's always positive. Outside the New Testament, this verb hupantao can be used in a hostile sense, but clearly it's used in a positive sense here. They went out to meet him, to welcome him. Now the witness of those that had seen Lazarus be resurrected and were testifying in this place, that witness was effective. Once again, we read about the crowd. The crowd was certainly excited to see their Messiah coming to them in accord with the prophecy of Zechariah 9, verse 9. Chapter 12, verse 19. Therefore the Pharisees said to one another, "You see that you are accomplishing nothing. Look, the world has gone after him." The frustration of the Pharisees was very real. They certainly were aware of the prophecy of Zechariah chapter 9, verse 9. They're afraid, confused, jealous, angry. They've already decided to kill that troublesome rabbi. But if the people catch them in their attempt to kill him, the consequences might be very dangerous for them. The atmosphere is increasingly unstable. He must be killed. But how? They're confused. And their expression that the world has gone after him is, of course, an exaggeration, but it's also kind of ironic. They were seeing many Jews from Jerusalem, Judea, Galilee, and also people from outside Israel going after him. But actually, it was not just the Jews who have gone after him. Gentiles, for example, some Greeks mentioned in the following verse, also have gone after him. Note again the divided response. In verses 17 and 18, people are telling of the resurrection of Lazarus and gathering to welcome him as king. But in verse 19, the Pharisees express great frustration. So by way of summary in this brief passage, look at all the various reactions. The disciples, they didn't understand until after Jesus was glorified. The eyewitnesses to Lazarus' resurrection kept on giving their testimony. Those that heard that testimony, they went out to meet him. And finally, the Pharisees are upset at his popularity. Their ironic statement, "Look how the whole world has gone after him," becomes like a bridge, so that in the next passage we get to hear about some people from that whole world out there, some Greeks.